What are the worst new SUVs of 2022 that you need to stay away from? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. In this video, I'm going to go through 10 of the worst new SUVs of 2022 that are best avoided if you're in the market shopping for a new vehicle. The reason why these particular SUVs have made the top 10 worst list is because of their combination of being uncompetitive, offering poor value for money, and sometimes a spotty reputation for poor build quality and long-term reliability. So if you want to know what are some of the worst SUVs that are best avoided if you're in the market for a new vehicle in 2022, then make sure to stick around until the end of this video. Let's get this list started with number 10, which is the Jeep Compass. Now, Jeep of course is famous for making popular vehicles like the Wrangler and Grand Cherokee SUV. The company has really struggled, however, when it comes to offering a good, competitive, small crossover SUV that offers good value for money. The Compass is not necessarily a really bad SUV in terms of the way it's designed. It does have that classic Jeep look that a lot of people are a fan of. The problem is that it's just uncompetitive in terms of what you're getting for your money. It's not a particularly great driving SUV, the interior quality and features that you get are only so-so, and it doesn't have the best reputation for long-term reliability either. It's also pretty expensive when compared to other small crossover SUVs, and because it doesn't have a great reputation for reliability, it doesn't have very high resale value either. The Compass just doesn't really offer that much value for the money, and Jeep is really banking on that reputation and image in order to make sales. So if you're in the market for a small crossover SUV, you're much better off buying something else with a much better design, better performance, and a better reputation for reliability, such as a Subaru Crosstrek, Mazda CX-30, or a Toyota Corolla Cross. Let's move on to number 9 on this list, which is the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross. Now, like the Compass, the Eclipse Cross is just not a very competitive small crossover SUV. Aside from its somewhat unique design, there's really not much that stands out about it when compared to the better and much more popular crossovers like, say, the Toyota RAV4, Honda CR-V, or Mazda CX-30. It just doesn't excel in any particular area, so there's no strong reason to spend just as much money on one as a better SUV from another brand. Even though there's not a lot of reliability information on the Eclipse Cross because it is a relatively new SUV, Mitsubishi as a whole does have a pretty mixed reputation when it comes to its long-term reliability. And because Mitsubishi has such a small presence and dealer network in North America, servicing them can be more of a pain and parts can be more expensive too. Now, the company does like to brag about its competitive 10-year warranty, but good luck finding any Mitsubishi dealer that's going to give you a new engine after 9 or 10 years. Realistically, it's not going to happen. So if you're shopping for a crossover SUV, do yourself a favor and shop for something else instead. But whatever you do, make sure it's not number 8 on this list, which is the Chevrolet Equinox and GMC Terrain. The Equinox and Terrain are GM's offerings for the small SUV segment, and neither one is a very appealing one to buy. There's nothing about their design, performance, or features that makes them stand above their much better competitors. And historically, neither SUV offers the best reliability either. Both the Equinox and Terrain used to be plagued with all kinds of serious engine issues, which sometimes resulted in total engine failure. Now, there's not a lot of reliability information on the newer 1.5 and 2-liter turbo engines that are now used, but based on GM's past, I wouldn't exactly have high hopes. The Equinox and Terrain can often be more expensive than much better SUVs, and they don't have the best resale value either. GM itself would probably acknowledge a lot of these criticisms because the company is going to be releasing a completely new Equinox in 2023 that's going to have a much bolder design, it's going to be completely electric, and it's also going to be much more aggressively priced. Until then, if you're looking for a small SUV similar to the Equinox or Terrain, you're much better off buying one of the alternatives like the RAV4, CX-5, or Forester. Now, unfortunately for GM, the Equinox and Terrain are not the only SUVs that make the top 10 worst list. It also applies to number 7, which is the Chevrolet Blazer. The Blazer was introduced back in 2019 as a larger, more practical, and bolder looking alternative to the Equinox. Unfortunately, aside from that more distinctive looking design, there's really not much reason to consider the Blazer over much better SUVs from other brands. There's just not much value with the Blazer. Its high price tag doesn't justify what you're getting for your money. Alternatives like the Hyundai Santa Fe, Honda Passport, or even the Toyota Highlander give you much better value for your money. The Passport and Highlander also have much better reputations for reliability and high resale value, which are things that the Blazer doesn't exactly have going for it either. Like the Equinox, GM is going to be completely revamping the Blazer in 2023, turning it into an all-electric SUV with a much better design. Hopefully when GM does that, they also give it a much better interior and better performance than the current version, and also much more aggressive pricing to make it more attractive to buy too. Let's move on to number 6 on this list, which is the Volkswagen Tiguan. Now, unlike the other SUVs on this list so far, the Tiguan is not exactly a poorly designed SUV. In fact, it's actually pretty well designed with an attractive, spacious interior, lots of great technology, and a great driving experience too. The problem with the Tiguan, like a lot of Volkswagen models in North America, is that it's just a little bit too expensive for what you're getting, and it also doesn't have a great reputation for long-term reliability either. Historically, Volkswagens tend to be pretty good for the first 4 to 5 years under warranty, but beyond that point they can develop a lot of problems and can be very expensive to repair too. The repair costs of Volkswagens out of warranty tend to be more comparable to European luxury cars like BMW and Mercedes instead of the mainstream cars they compete against like Toyota and Honda. So if you're buying a Tiguan and expecting it to be just as reliable and cheap to own long-term as a RAV4, then you better think again. It's just not a good choice for those who are intolerant of expensive repair bills, and is a much better choice just to lease for 3 to 4 years and then give back. A lot of this really applies to a lot of the expensive European luxury brands, including number 5 on this list, which is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. The Stelvio was part of Alfa Romeo's great return back to North America in 2018, and so far it hasn't exactly been the best success. As of now, the company still only has 2 models, the Giulia and Stelvio SUV, and they also have a pretty small dealer network too. Now the Stelvio isn't exactly a bad SUV, it does have a nice design and a great driving feel too. But it's just not as well-rounded as the other luxury SUVs that you can buy for a similar price, like the BMW X3, Audi Q5, or the Genesis GV70. And historically, Alfa Romeo has never had a great reputation for long-term reliability, so you might experience more issues down the road too. Now, expensive repair bills out of warranty are pretty common with most European luxury brands, but the difference with Alfa Romeo is that they have a very small dealer network, making them much more difficult to service. And even though I usually only recommend leasing European cars because of that reputation, the Stelvio usually doesn't have very good lease deals when compared to its rivals, and it doesn't have very good resale value either. There's just no strong argument for buying one, and you're much better off buying something else instead. Now, European brands are not the only ones that make SUVs that you need to avoid. It can happen to Japanese brands too, and number 4 is proof of that, which is the INFINITI QX50. The past few years have been pretty rocky for INFINITI with plummeting sales, mostly due to an aging lineup of uncompetitive cars that just don't have a lot going for them. As far as the SUVs go, the QX50 is a pretty good example of that. Although it does have a pretty attractive design and a spacious interior, there's not much else going for it that makes it worth considering over the much better alternatives. The interior has some nice finishes, but the technology is really dated, using the same infotainment system that INFINITI has had for almost a decade. And the driving experience is not that great. The CVT transmission doesn't perform very well, and the 2-liter turbo variable compression engine doesn't make very good power or good fuel economy either. It's also a very complicated engine design with a questionable reputation for reliability that could end up being problematic down the road. The QX50 just doesn't have a lot going for it, and because it's not as good as its rivals, it doesn't have very good resale value either. It's a shame really, because the freshly redesigned 2022 QX60 is a much better SUV in every way, and is proof that the company can design a really good SUV if they want to. Until the company makes changes to the rest of its lineup, your best option is just to buy something else instead. But whatever you do, make sure it's not number 3 on this list, which is the Jaguar E-Pace. The E-Pace was introduced a few years back to compete with other small luxury SUVs, only it never really stood much of a chance, mostly due to its inferior design and much higher price tag. The E-Pace just doesn't offer very good value, and when you match that with JAG's pretty poor reputation for reliability and inferior build quality, it's just not an attractive buy. The E-Pace, like the rest of the Jaguar lineup, is pretty much living on borrowed time, and the company plans to introduce a brand new lineup of all-electric vehicles starting in 2025. Until then, if you're looking for an attractive small luxury SUV, you better be looking at something else instead. Just don't look at number 2 on the list, which is the Land Rover Range Rover Evoque. The Evoque started off with a bit of a bang when it hit the market a decade ago thanks to its very attractive design. But aside from the style, image, and badge appeal, there's really not much of a reason to consider the Range Rover Evoque. It's not a very practical SUV thanks to its tight interior and poor outward visibility, it doesn't offer very good value for money, and it's not very reliable either. Poor build quality, long-term reliability, and low resale value are all things that Land Rover is pretty well known for. So unless you're a major fan of the styling and image and you're willing to pay extra for it, there's really not much reason to consider one. As bad as it is, there is another new SUV in 2022 that's an even worse buy than the Range Rover, and that is the Maserati Levante. Maserati is a brand that has really struggled to offer competitive models that give you good value and reliability. Unfortunately, those are things that Maserati is not really known for, and the Levante is a great example of this. In terms of its performance, interior, and features, it's just way inferior to any comparable luxury SUV for a similar price. So unless you're a big fan of the badge or the design and you're able to get a really good lease deal on one, there's just no real reason to consider it. You'd just be better off buying one of the alternatives like a Porsche Cayenne or a BMW X5 instead. So there you have it, the 10 worst SUVs of 2022. Let me know what you thought of the SUVs on this list by leaving a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also take a look at some of my other car videos by checking out these links over here. Make sure to follow me on TikTok and Instagram. And if you need any additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to check out carhelpcanada.com. Thanks so much for watching and see you next time.